Oh, hey.
Hello, hello.
Hi, how's it going?
All right. Put this over here. Okay. Glad to connect.
Yes, indeed.
You're not allowed to tell me about the soccer game, by the way.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you've watched or if you're watching it or what, but
Wow. Yes, well,
looking forward to it tonight.
I definitely will be watching, the one tonight, England versus Argentina. Should be good.
Yeah, that one I think is tomorrow, and then Spain and France is right now, I think, right?
Yeah.
Or it just ended actually.
Yes.
So, yeah. No updates to play.
No problem, no problem. And just so you know, I am just recording everything on my computer here, and
Yeah.
nothing's live streamed at this time. So, I just wanted to keep it simple, but record everything.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to have you record everything.
Yeah,
I'm very, comfortable with radical transparency, like I said
yeah,
over email. And if we're like live casting stuff, then I can't talk about like client
exactly,
projects or sensitive
exactly.
stuff in
So for
process. So
for today, we're just a short meeting, so I'm just gonna record it all, and if afterwards you want to
yeah,
upload it, we can. Yeah.
no problem.
And I don't know if you do transcript, but I got everything set up for the transcript on my Zoom, but then
Yeah, go
realized,
for it.
well, no, but I realized that now I'm on your Zoom, so I don't know if your room has the transcript set up.
I have it. Okay, it's going.
Okay, maybe I just can't see it.
Yeah, it's just through Zoom.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I'll get that set up for future meetings so I can have double transcript going.
No problem.
Awesome. So, yes, where do you want to start?
Let's see. I mean, I guess just in general, you reached out, so I'm happy to kind of hear a little bit about what you're up to and see how it can be most helpful to you.
Okay, well, I'll just start by basically saying that, I've known Tracy Gary since Occupies. This is like 2012 or whatever it was.
Right
So a little
on.
over a decade, and I've, met with her multiple times. Basically, she was involved a lot in like just building fundraising networks and, collaborative networks. And so, in general, Occupy obviously didn't do particularly well, and a lot of like social movements don't do particularly well on the left, especially. So, in the context of the pandemic, I mean, my life and all the work I did, it kind of fell apart during the pandemic, and has never really come back together. So with AI in the last year, I've just been building so many new exciting projects, and it's just such a huge time. We could talk about that forever. But the point is that I contacted Tracy Gary about fundraising efforts, and in this new wave, I have like maybe 5 grants and LOIs in, as well as 5 additional connections to potential funding investor opportunities, or but obviously nothing's happened yet. You're the second person I've talked to besides Tracy Gary in the last month on this. So that's kind of like the overall direction. She passed me on to you. She was like, "Oh, you should definitely talk to him because he's also big working on AI and nonprofits and social movements, and that you guys should connect and just see where things go."
Yeah, sure.
So yeah.
Happy to. And so you in your emails you mentioned,
Mhm.
5 or 6 different affiliations and projects. Which one are you hoping to launch and raise money for?
Well, this goes into my neurodiversity and my and how I think in my mind. But it's for me, it's just all one project. These are just things that I've been working on. It's like building an ecosystem that's interrelated. So the one of the things that you had talked about is like you got your book and your work for AI, working for nonprofits and working for collective groups. And so for me, that also has to be AI working towards stabilizing funding and resources, right? So one of my primary projects was Regen, which is a resource generation platform. How can we help support social projects, organizations to generate and stabilize, resources, whether it's financial or not? And so that is one component. From there, I'm just anything decentralized, distributed networks. Huge on decentralized health, decentralized civic engagement. And so that's where the idea of decentralized democracy and rethinking agentic democracy comes in. But they're related. So all these different platforms are connected together. But I would say the umbrella of all of it is how do you rethink civic engagement in a decentralized and distributed way with AI, right? And what is that going to look like in the next 20, 50, 100 years, and how is that going to affect social movements in the context of building these new infrastructures that haven't existed before.
Yeah.
So in that context, I think my place has always been in previous, before the pandemic, I really worked to support a lot of other projects, right? So sometimes we'd have 3, 4 different sponsored organizations under our nonprofits, and we would help them fundraise. I mean, I helped raise over $1 million for other projects, but I've never been able to successfully raise money or get grants or get invested or anything in the projects that I'm working on, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but so typically, I feel like I'm in a similar area where I'm into supporting other people's projects that I truly believe that, the most important thing in the world is that we haven't solved this problem yet, right? The
Mm-hmm.
problems aren't solved, and I'm not saying I know the solution, right? So the more projects that we can help, the more activities we can get out there, the more nonprofits, the more programs that we can have out there, the higher probability that we can actually solve problems, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, it sounded like there were like a handful of donors slash funders that you've kind of identified. Are those, online research results, or it's like a relationship where you've talked with someone at a foundation or a high net worth donor that's like,
Yeah.
that's a great idea and I want to give you money?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very disconnected. So Tracy's really the only person I've directly contacted. Then you're the second person I've contacted. So everything's mainly cold calls and writing grants to foundations and agencies and just trying to work my way in, figure out how to play their game. Each one's a little different. So it is also a long-term game. Usually it can take months, if not longer, right? So I just generally have never been particularly successful or good at the whole playing the game part of it, I guess is the easiest way to say. Um, yeah. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Yeah.
it does,
Yeah.
but it's also wrong-headed. Like it's not going to work.
Yeah. As
I'm
far
happy
as
to
like,
give you my perspective or just like tactical support.
yes.
And I could be as candid or as close fasted as you'd like. I
Yeah, I'm
guess
looking for
in
direction for
general,
sure.
how can I be most helpful? Like, do you want me to give you advice on how to navigate actualizing what you're talking about? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, be as direct as you need to be. Obviously the key things for me is like, I mean, I'm not looking for just a free ride or anything. I want to do the hard work. I do the hard work, and I also want to build the relationships. And I know it takes time. So getting the right direction. The overall goal is, stabilizing finances, but also helping and supporting and seeing the world become a better place. Really making
Yeah.
these projects happen. So any ideas you have in putting me in the right direction is great. I'm also very interested on what you're working on and how I can support and see that through and collaborate. But yeah, so let's just hit me with it. I mean, obviously, cold calling, foundations and agencies and investor groups is obviously not the best thing in the world, but it's at least a start. And I mean, from my research, there's just a huge amount, like hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially over $1 billion next year, going towards AI funded social projects, right? So it's a definitely an interesting time in terms of that.
I mean,
Yeah.
there is some supply from the marketplace. Like, there is money out there, and the numbers are getting crazy. And I'll be happy to give you some candid feedback in terms of how to navigate that. Before I do that, though, just so I understand sort of the context here, is this just you in a personal project? Are there other people on the team that are working with you to move this vision forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say generally it's me, but I work with a person named Lucy, and then we have Martins, and we've got Alberto, and we have Mel. So Mel is in California. I've been working with her since college, and she has a grant writing organization. But again, my whole life I basically told you're not fundable, you're not grant ready, you're not, and so she doesn't even want to work with me on grants because I've just never been able to convince anybody that she should, or anyone should. But in the context of the other people are in either Africa, Italy, um, you know, and Bangladesh, some place like that. So we work in different with people around the world, and in terms of my team, and we're
But
not.
are they like contributing hours every week to move this work forward and do the research and the landscape analysis and
Yeah.
figure out how to do
Yeah, I
the
mean,
work that you want to do?
as far as what we're trying to get funding, right, I would be the project lead, the project investor, and the person doing the coding, the person doing the presentation, and all the front stuff, right? So they're mainly just helping me with like back end stuff, finances, taxes, just running our organizations and dealing with everyday,
Okay.
yeah, issues and getting it. But it's still small. I mean, we're tiny, we're small, we're not particularly functional. We have been in the past. Everything's cooperatively run, so we base everything on consensus, and it's been over 20 years of doing this. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of hours of videos and hours of all of our decision making and consensus and all that online. But it's just been since the pandemic, it's been much smaller and much less
Yeah.
functional. Yeah.
And have you already done a landscape analysis? Like, do you know who else is out there working on the same challenge and kind of thinking about it?
A little bit, but obviously not in the context of these specific platforms and programs, but in the context of just general sponsorship and organizations, there's certainly three or four main, organizations that do nonprofit sponsorship as like the primary thing, and then you have all the other works that do nonprofit sponsorships. So I would say overall no, that I should do
Well,
more analysis.
not so much in terms of like the non not so much in terms of like a home for your project, but more like they're in your lane and they're already working on, in the age of AI, what does it look like to rethink civic engagement and this decentralized approach to, networks and health and civic engagement, et cetera, sort of, that vision that you're laying out.
Mm-hmm.
Like other people are working on some different pieces of that, and I'm wondering if you've done the research and kind of surveyed the landscape to figure out who's out there, what lanes are they in, how's what you're envisioning different, how's what you're doing going to add value to the movement, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I would lean towards the no side. My efforts on searching for decentralized systems in general is difficult, and also obviously in related to decentralized democracy specifically, there's not a lot there, but obviously I have been involved in crypto, and crypto is very decentralized and is very in decentralized autonomous organizations and all that. And so I have dabbled in that some, but that's typically very, very heavy weighted on capital ownership
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to democracy. Yeah.
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 Um,
But I'd say overall that there's a lot more research that could be done. And it's a little nuanced, so it's not, I haven't had like super luck with finding groups that are working on exactly what I'm working on, but I will definitely do more research, and there's certainly a group handful of specific organizations that have come up in past research, but I don't know it on top of my head. I'd have to look at some of the documents.
yeah, there definitely are.
Yeah.
How and you guys have a nonprofit or a fiscal sponsor? Like, what's your structure?
Yeah, so this is where it gets into the neurodiversity again. I do a multi-organizational structure because I'm not tied to any one single direction. So primarily we started with nonprofits. I've set up 3 nonprofit 501c public charities over.
But in terms of this effort, like, is it housed anywhere?
Well, these are just my nonprofits that I set up. So we do lots of taxes. So we have a trust and a for-profit, LLC structure. So it's basically you have the for-profit side, the nonprofit side, and like the trust sort of oversees the assets for both sides. So overall, I'm probably in the negative about $20,000 a year, and I'm not able to pay myself or anything. But we do have, funds and assets and finances and taxes. So we do about 5 to 10 sets of taxes, and just it's definitely not your normal structure, if that makes sense. But
there's not a set structure for this effort, right? It's a kind of coalition of entities.
Exactly. Well, it's really just a group of people. It's like myself with a team of people that we can bring together as needed, and it's just we just never had really the ability to get the funding and the stability to actually bring it together. I mean, my goal at this point is really, building some platforms, getting some people interested in the platforms, and then doing much more outreach. And so I think one of the main, funding components is just advertising and outreach for platforms and getting people connected to it, as far as keeping things simple. But as far as your question in terms of the structure, I mean, we have a board of directors that I would go to for official decisions that need to be addressed and made, right? And then we have some various advisors, but we don't
I
necessarily have an
mean, like if you're
official.
going to apply for a grant, like
Would
who's
be through
applying
our
for it?
501c3. The main one I'm working with is the World Collaborative for Transformative Community, and that would be the main 501c3 that I use. And we do have two other 501c3 nonprofits, public charities. Yeah. So within
Yes, so that's inherently confusing because sort of this effort. Okay,
yeah.
let
So
me take a step back. What I
yeah.
would say, and first of all, I'm going to send you a list of like 30 different leaders and organizations that may be relevant to what you're doing in terms of that landscape analysis.
Yeah.
If I were to attempt to solve the Rubik's Cube that you're sort of like, laying out, first of all, there may be, multiple, areas and facets where there's inherent complexity. And like you need to, the Einstein quote is, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough, right? So being able to really clearly articulate, the problem you're here to solve, how you're going to do that, and the structure that you'll pursue to achieve that goal is really important. And you need to be able to speak very clearly to, really what you're talking about here is a think tank. So, say having an elevator pitch basically that.
What was those three again? The problem you're here to solve, and then
the problem you're here to solve, your approach.
The approach and the structure you're here. The structure.
And then the structure that it's happening through. Those were the three things that I mentioned.
Cool.
But so just to kind of like out loud riff and like if I were you and trying to talk to someone, I would be saying something like, given we've entered this modern era of AI where society is increasingly decentralized and the alignment of incentives that tie us all together as a society and community are getting disjointed and frazzled. Really the question is, what would it look like for the world to embrace a new model of leadership, of collaboration, and a decentralized approach to civic engagement, to promoting public health, and to restoring democracy in our country and throughout the world. And we at the blah 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 have mobilized a group of leading thinkers in this industry, and we are in the process of building off of our 20 years of experience in the field to launch a think tank and dedicate more robust resources to this effort. Although we've got big plans, in the medium to long term, our first priority and what we're seeking a seed grant to fund currently is a landscape and gap analysis to identify, and back to my idea about doing this. That's the thing you should be fundraising for. Is like step one to actualize and operationalize this vision you're talking about is a landscape and gap analysis to see who else is already doing this work, right? Seek first to collaborate and only then to lead is the Bill Clinton quote. So it's like, who else is out there? Who's thinking about this stuff? What are they doing? And trying to organize that into some kind of framework or rubric. And then what's missing, or what could we add on top that would enhance all of their efforts and tie this movement together and ultimately help to achieve the broader goal? We don't know the answer to that, but give us $100,000 and we will figure that out over the next 6 months, right? Like, so that's kind of like the elevator pitch that I could see potentially leading to funding. Can't really give you my proposal because it's specific to Heinz. But that is a project that I've just gotten funded for, and that list of interviewees was part of what came out of that. Even with that tighter, cogent elevator pitch, and you're just talking about like one C3 requesting the grant for this planning grant to do this work, and then whether it spills over into the trust or the LLC or the other C3s, who cares?
Yeah.
But keep it simple. All they need to know for now is you have a C3 that you're looking for grants through. It's been up and running for more than a couple of years. Here's the vision and the plan, And step one that we need funding for, which is about 150 grand, is 6 months for a robust landscape analysis and gap analysis under that framing. Even with all of that, which I think would kind of get you exponentially more likely to secure funding, it's still a slog, and it's still like buying a lottery ticket and a long shot, to be honest. Because number one, sort of like, who are you guys, and being able to speak to, your knowledge of the field, what else you've done, and why you're the right people to sort of launch and lead this thinking, is a big gap. Having those funding relationships, because ultimately the spray and pray approach of, hey, there's $1 billion out there that's set up for this kind of thing, let's go get some, and then we're going to put together a bunch of custom grant applications that we spend 5 or 10 hours a pop on, way less than 5% success rate. And even if you're lucky and you win one of the lottery tickets, you're going to get less than you asked for. You're going to be infinitely better off spending that time and energy, instead of sending out those grants, is doing the initial research, figuring out, who is the best fit and why, and more importantly than why they should fund you, why, funding you is going to advance their goals. Mozilla Foundation or whatever, your goals are aligned. Talk about not so much you, but how you can advance their goals. Using that, secure a call or a meeting where you do your dog and pony and, impress and inspire them, give them this clear vision where they can see the landscape and gap analysis as the solution to the problem and moving that first domino forward. And then they're inviting a proposal at a set budget with a specific rationale. And then you're actually submitting the grant once it's been invited. Then your success rate's going to go up exponentially. And if you Google my name and Effective Foundation fundraising webinar, you can kind of learn a lot more about that process. But ultimately, it's that kind of vampire rule of only going into the house where you've been invited. You're going to get way better results. And it's a slog. It means, pursuing 20 or 30 funders for 6 to 9 months until you get a call or meeting. And even then, you got to nail the call or meeting in order to get the invite to apply. But that would be the much better way to approach this. So if you were to do this, I would kind of identify that super tight elevator pitch, be able to answer those 3 questions very clearly, tie that prospect research you've done less into grants out the door and more into hey buddy, I think we're in a unique position to advance your goals of blank because of our focus on blank. Do you have time to meet, 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now? Here's a couple options, pick one. No answer, 2.5 weeks go by, knock, 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 still want to meet, no answer, knock, knock, knock. And hopefully after 10 times, they say, they give you the time, and then you have the call or the meeting, and then you get invited, and then you submit the grant. That's sort of the alternative approach to trying to address what you're talking about.
Indeed. So we don't have a lot of time left within the half an hour here, but I think the thing that's the newest to me of what you're saying is definitely the concept of a landscape and gap analysis, right? So it sounds doable. Well, for me, I feel like I need to do that regardless of funding. So you're saying, okay, the first funding would be $150,000 for the landscape and gap analysis. So I'm not sure exactly what in the budget would be for a landscape gap analysis, except for the time that it takes to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly the budget. It's your time and it's the team's time to actually do the interviews and the research and read the reports and all that stuff. So let's see if I can kind of sanitize this in real time for you.
So yeah, I mean, typically I would lean towards choosing a specific project for the landscape and gap analysis. For example, our civil, just decentralized democracy as a project, right? And then focusing the landscape and gap analysis on that, I think that is doable. So, but at the same time, I'm certainly not the person who's going to wait 6 months or longer to just get started with the landscape and gap analysis. I mean, I'm just going to do whatever I can. So just to make sure, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say on the landscape and gap analysis, but I definitely going to research more into it, make sure that's moving forward, get clarity on it, incorporate that into potential funding in grants, but not wait because it seems like it's important. And then from there, I mean, my whole picture is like wherever I need to get funding. I mean, what I've done for over 20 years is I just find clients, I do work. I mean, obviously before the pandemic, whatever I can do to help other people make whatever they need to do, and then they pay you to do it as a client, and then I just put all the money into projects, right, and organizing. So from there, whether it's getting more clients or getting a job or doing whatever to bring in funds and resources, I just got to do whatever I can do to move the work forward. So that's definitely going to happen. But yes, I will work on the landscape and gap analysis and start researching that and send you a little something. But
what I would say there, so I just sent you my proposal that I used to get funding for this exact thing. In my case, it was 60 grand for 3 months or something.
For the landscape and gap analysis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was sort of for what was available and whatever. I think it could be as much as 6 months and 150 grand, but it kind of, that's part of the act of fundraising, is like figuring out what's on the table. And hey, you're willing to do it for free. If someone can give you 5 grand, that's better than nothing. So, it may be something you're doing anyway. And if you get to the other side of the rainbow, and if you solve the Rubik's Cube, and if you have the answers to who's out there, what are they doing, what's the taxonomy of how groups are organized, and what the different lanes are, and what's missing and would be most additive, then you could basically skip that fundraising ask, and my fundraising ask would be whatever comes out of that. What the sector really needs is some kind of glue to turn the silos into pipelines and tilt them on their sides, or a centralized technical infrastructure, or a broad-based digital bill of rights, or whatever. But like, if you know what the world needs, then actually doing that and building that is the thing for which you're fundraising.
So I think I hear what you're saying here. Let me see if this is right. That basically, I'm working on an area that's relatively new. Every time I've been working on these grant submissions, we're quoting these studies, right, about what the different grant agencies need. And so basically we're building, because we're kind of working on a new direction, we're building the forefront of the research and landscape and gap analysis that we can then quote in our future funding. Basically, it's so we actually have our own report.
The future fundraising is filling those gaps.
Exactly.
Right?
And then we're quoting a report.
So essentially what you're trying to avoid is the white savior complex, is what it's typically called. So, and I'll give you a great TED Talk to watch that's really, really powerful about this exact concept. If you really want to change the world, shut up and listen. So what you don't want to do is rush into the movement with this like, we'll save you attitude and we know everything. And granted, you've been looking at this issue for many years, so you do know some stuff, but there is an ecosystem. And I just sent you an email with like 30 different leaders and organizations, some of which overlap with your vision. So looking at each of those, having conversations, looking at their websites, doing research, reading reports and articles, all that stuff is ultimately the process that will allow you to figure out like, who else is out there that's thinking about solving the same problem, and how would I organize that landscape? There's people doing advocacy work. There's people doing public awareness and communications work. There's people doing skill building and digital literacy work, whatever. But like, what are the different lanes? And then also asking those people like, what's missing, or how, what would be most helpful to you and to all the other like-minded organizations. And especially if you're hearing the same thing from multiple people, ding, 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 like the sector needs this. And it's no longer just, I think what the world needs is this, but no, we've spoken with dozens of leaders and aligned organizations, and 82% of them said, if they have this, it would be helpful, so we're going to build that. Here's our plan to do that. This is the budget and the timeline. Anybody want to fund it, right? Like, so it's like the answer to the question, but asking the question and working through that process of inquiry, that's the landscape analysis. And within the landscape analysis is identifying those gaps of where somebody, us presumably, can add unique value and, be the high tide that raises all these boats and gets this broader mission to advance. Great. Now that's something that is also fundable, and we would shop that around and talk about how this solution, addresses your goals of blah, 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 that are in line with our goals. Here's what we identified as the linchpin and cornerstone solution. And is going to move it forward, so give us money so we can build this or do this. Does that track?
Great. Yeah. So what I'm hearing in next steps.
Fast, so I'm talking
Oh no, fast is good. Fast is good. So basically, what I'm hearing here in relationship to next steps, like moving into like the next steps of moving forward, is that one, I'm redrafting my pitch towards this landscape analysis and gap analysis, and then building the landscape and gap analysis with whatever funding I can get. And then from there, rewriting the grants, utilizing the landscape gas analysis. And before I really building landscape gas analysis, building the landscape gap analysis is basically going through the list that you sent me, doing additional research and ranking and prioritizing, the top, I don't know, at least start with 10 organizations that are clearly overlapping and focusing on these others' work, and then interviewing each one of them, like calling, connecting, and interviewing each one of them. And that basically is the foundation to the beginning of the gap analysis, is really getting their perspectives, and then from there utilizing the gap analysis itself for future grants and funding.
Yeah, more so the insights from the
the insights of
right?
where is the gap, where are the needs, and focusing on those needs for the community.
The one thing I would say is, again, like, I would have you repurpose all of those hours you're putting into writing grants, because it's basically wasted time right now. Whether you update it with the gap analysis and landscape stuff or not, like, it's still a waste of time. Take all those hours and put them into actually doing the landscape and gap analysis and into reaching out to funders to try to get a call or a meeting. And the only research you're doing into those funders to facilitate that is the Venn diagram of how is this effort, this initiative, arguably in a unique place to advance the goals of that funder that are all unique and specific. And leading with, here's how we can help you. Are you willing to talk and make time to explore this? Here's a couple options. Like, knock, 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 it's been 2 weeks, haven't heard from you. Yeah. Here's a couple of new options. Like, I would put my time in that, and then actually doing the landscape and gap analysis. And to your point, that would entail, and instead of waiting for the funding, if you've got the capacity to do it, especially with some freed up hours that were used in grant writing before, great. I've laid out a work plan of how to do that in the proposal I just sent you, that, is the one that we use to get funding. But in short, it's like doing the research, whether it's from my list, whether it's online research or AI or just talking to people, who else is thinking about this challenge, right? Yeah. Ideally trying to organize them into some kind of framework or rubric of, here are the 6 different lanes or primary areas of focus of everybody in this ecosystem focused on this shared problem, however you want to organize that. And then to your point, it's actually trying to get in touch with them and getting them to make time for a quick phone call. And in those calls, learning more about their work, learning more about how they're thinking about this broader vision, what kind of activities and investments they're making to move that work forward, and ultimately where they're stuck or what's missing or what would be helpful to them, which is the input into the gap analysis, right? It's like, what are your gaps, Jay is working on this thing, and what would be really helpful is blah, 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 blah. Or where I'm stuck and I don't know how to move forward is blah, 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 blah. Or, here's a boundary of we can't do more because of our inability to blah, 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 blah. Great. Gather all the blah, 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 blahs onto one list and organize those and come up with the solution to not the world, but the sector's problems. And then get somebody that sees the value in solving that problem and invite them to pay you to actually implement that solution, whether it's building something or launching something or creating an organization or whatever it is. But that it should be the answer to a question. It should be the solution to a problem, not a solution in search of a problem. And the gap and landscape analysis will help you identify what does the world say is needed, so that when you craft that solution, it's not your solution, it's our solution. And you can operationalize it and say, well, if you believe that, here's what it entails. This is the timeline. This is the budget. And here's how it advances your goals. What do you think? And hopefully somebody says, that's a great idea, and I'd love to give you that money. Let's keep the grant to 200 grand. Let's keep the timeline to a year. and send it over by this date, and I'll run it up the flagpole. Now you should be taking the time to write that grant.
Yes.
So
Great.
that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, I definitely think it makes a lot of sense and is clear in the context that there are very, very clear gaps in what our society needs, and understanding the landscape is a clear, objectival, process, right?
Right on.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
that is doable, and in many ways is bring, in some ways like, the scientific method or other types of methods into social movements, right? So it's a very, very
totally.
excellent model. So I'm very impressed. So overall, in terms of communicating with you, obviously I'm going to report back to Tracy at some point, but let me get 10 groups behind my belt, and then I'll start drafting some of this stuff and let you know if any things are if any bells are ringing up, and I'll report back to you. I don't know how long that might take. It might take a few weeks, a few months, who knows.
No problem.
But
Take your time, but I'm happy to help however I can. You've got
Yeah.
a couple resources I emailed over in terms of some potential folks for the landscape stuff,
Yeah.
and as well as that sanitized proposal and kind of work plan that may be helpful. You can feel free to borrow from that liberally. We didn't cover anything sensitive, so you can go ahead and publish whatever you want from this conversation.
Including the list of all these groups and people?
No, that I wouldn't publish.
Perfect. Okay,
That's
so
sort of internal.
And obviously the landscape analysis would also not be public, right?
I think I sanitized that proposal, but I wouldn't really be comfortable with.
Perfect. Yeah. So basically, what we talked about, the notes all open, but the documents themselves not. Perfect. That sounds great. I think everything's good. The only other thing I could ask you is if there's any specific things about your work and helping people help, like you alluded to a specific seminar or something, things that I might want to get more connected to in the long term. Otherwise, I think we're good.
Yeah, like I said, if you just Google my name and Effective Foundation fundraising webinar, you'll find a few podcasts and webinars I've done where you can kind of learn more about effective grant writing. And I would encourage you to check one of those out.
Okay.
That's all public.
And then I'll watch this other YouTube video here that you sent me. That I
oh yeah, the Ernesto Ciroli one around changing the world. I love that one.
This looks like Ernesto Stiol. Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll watch that up. I'll look up a couple of videos from you as well.
Cool, man.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This is really
if I can
good.
be helpful to any of the folks in your network, feel free to send them over. I'm happy to chat.
Yeah, if I make any connection, we'll see what happens. But yeah, you have a wonderful day, and go World Cup. It's very exciting.
Buddy,
Only a few more games left, but you take care.
I know.
Yeah.
Take care, man.
All right, bye. Ciao.